If What would you do if you thought your country was on the path to tyranny? If you saw one man gaining too much power, would you try to stop him, even if that man was one of your closest friends and allies? This was the questions hunting Roman Senator Marcus Julius Junius Brutus in 44 BC. The year Brutus would be assassinated. Opposing unchecked power wasn't just a political matter for Brutus, it was personal. He claimed descent from Lucius Junius Brutus, who had helped overthrow the tyrannical king known as Turkane the Proud, instead of seizing power himself. The elder Brutus led the people in the rousing oath to rule. Rome became a republic based on the principle that no one man should hold was too much power. This principle was threatened. Julius Caesar's rise to the powerful position of consul have been dramatic. Years of military triumphs had been Lucius men in After defeating his rival Pompey the Great in a bitter civil war, his power was at its peak. His victory and initiatives such as distributing land to the poor popular republic, and many senators vied for his favor by showering him with honor. Statues were built, temples were dedicated, and the whole month and ceremony still called July today. More importantly, the title of dictator meant a grand temporary emergency power in wartime have been bestowed upon Caesar several times in succession, and in 44 BCE he was made dictator perpetual, dictator for a potentially unlimited term. All of this was too much for the senators who feared a return of monarchy their ancestors had fought to abolish, as well as those own ambitions were impeded by Caesar's rule. A group of conspirators, calling themselves began secret discovered plans for assassination. Leading them was the Gaius Cassius Longus and his friend and brother-in-law Brutus. Joining such conspiracy was no easy choice for Brutus, even though Brutus said Pompey and Caesar had reportedly intervened to save his life, not only pardoning him, but even accepting him as a close advisor and elevating him to important posts. Brutus was hesitant to conspire against the man who had treated him like a son, but in Cassius's insistence and Brutus' own fear of Caesar's ambitions won out. Meeting came on March 15. At the Senate meeting, had showed departed on his next military campaign. As many as 60 conspirators surrounded him, unseating the daggers from his toe and stabbed him from all sides. As the story goes, Caesar struggled fiercely until he saw Brutus. Despite the famous line, "Et tu, Brute," written by Shakespeare, we don't know Caesar's actual name was. Some ancient sources claim he said nothing, while others record the phrase, "And you, child?" Fearing speculation that Brutus may actually legitimate son. But all ugly, he covered his face and gave up the fight, falling the ground after being stabbed 23 times. Unfortunately for Brutus, he and the other conspirators underestimated Caesar's popularity among the Roman public, many of whom saw him as an effective leader, and the Senate as a corrupted aristocracy. Within the moment of Caesar's assassination, Rome was in a state of panic. Most of the senators had fled, while assassins barricaded themselves. Captain Mark Antony, Caesar's friend and co-consul, was swift to seize the upper hand, delivering passionate speeches at Caesar's funeral days later that whipped the crowd into the frenzy and grief and anger. As a result, the liberators were forced out of Rome. The ensuing power vacuum led to a series of civil wars, during which Brutus, facing certain defeat, took his own life. Ironically, the ultimate opposite would be the opposite of what the conspirators had hoped to accomplish. The end of the Republic, and the concentration of power under the office of Emperor. Opinions over the assassinations of Caesar were divided from and have remained so. As for Brutus himself, few historical figures have inspired such a conflict and legacy. In Dante's Inferno, he was imprisoned in the very center of hell and eternally chewed by Satan himself for his crime of betrayal. But Swiss Grievous Travel described him as one of the most virtuous and benevolent people to have lived. The interpretation of Brutus as a selfless or opportunistic trait has shifted with the tide. But even today, over 2,000 years later, questions about the price of loyalty, the conflict between personal loyalty and universal ideals, and the unintended consequences remain more relevant than ever. What would you do if you thought your country was on the path to tyranny? If you saw a man gaining too much power, would you try to stop him? Even if that man was one of your closest friends and allies? These were the questions haunting Roman Senator Marcus Julius Brutus in 44 BCE, the year Julius Caesar would be assassinated. Opposing unchecked power wasn't just a political matter for Brutus, it was a personal one. He claimed descent from Lucius Junius Brutus, who had helped overthrow the Tronian king known as Trokin the Proud, instead of seizing power himself. The elder Brutus led the people in a rousing oath to never again allow a king to rule. Rome became a republic based on a principle that no one man should hold too much power. Now, 4.5 centuries later, this principle was threatened. Julius Caesar's rise to the powerful position of consul had been dramatic. Years of military triumphs had made him wealthiest man in Rome. And after defeating his rival Pompey the Great in a bitter civil war, his power was at its peak. His victories on initiatives such as distributing land to the poor had made him popular with the public. The many senators vied for his favor by showing him with honors. Statues were built, temples were dedicated, and the whole month was renamed, still called July today. More importantly, the title of dictator meant a grand temporary emergency power in wartime had been bestowed upon Caesar several times in succession. And in 44 BCE, he was made dictator perpetual, dictator for potentially unlimited time. All of this was too much for the senator, who feared the return to monarchy their ancestors had fought to abolish, as well as those whose own power and ambition were impeded by Caesar's rule. A group of conspirators, calling themselves the Liberators, began to secretly discuss plans to assassination, leading them for the Gaius Cassius Longinus and his friend or brother-in-law Brutus. Joining conspiracy was not an easy choice for Brutus, even though Brutus had sided with Pompey in European civil war. Caesar had personally intervened to save his life, not only pardoning him, but even accepting him as close advisor and elevating him to important post. Brutus was hesitant to conspire against the man who had treated him like a son, but in the end, Cassius' insistence and Brutus' own fear of Caesar's ambitions won out. The moment they'd been waiting for came on March 15, at a Senate meeting held shortly before Caesar was departed on his next military campaign. As many as 60 conspirators surrounded him, unseating daggers from the togas and stabbing at him from all sides. As the story goes, Caesar struggled fiercely until he saw Brutus. Despite the famous line, "Et tu, Brutus," written by Shakespeare, we don't know Caesar's actual dying words. Some ancient sources claim he said nothing, while others record the phrase, "And you, child?" Fueling speculation, Brutus may have actually been Caesar's illegitimate son. But all agree that when Caesar saw Brutus among his attackers, he covered his face and gave up a fight, falling to the ground after being stabbed 23 times. Unfortunately, Brutus, he and as a conspirator had popularity among the Roman public, many of whom saw him and senator as a corrupt aristocracy. Within moments of Caesar's assassination, Rome was in a state of panic. Most of the other senators had fled, while the assassins barricaded themselves on the Capitoline Hill. Mark Antony, Caesar's friend and consul, was swift to seize upper hand, delivering passionate speech at Caesar's funeral days later that whipped into frenzy and grief and anger. As a result, the liberators were forced out of Rome. An ensuing power vacuum led to a series of civil wars, during which Brutus, facing a certain defeat, took his own life. Ironically, the ultimate result would be the opposite of what the conspirator had hoped to accomplish, but the end, the concentration power and the office of emperor. Opinions of the assassination of Caesar were divided from the start and have remained so. As for Brutus, themselves, few historical figures have inspired such a conflicting legacy. In Dante's Inferno, he was placed in the very center of hell, and eternally chewed by Satan himself for his crime of betrayal. But Swiss Gerber's traveler described him as one of the most virtuous and benevolent people to have. But the interpretation proves as a selfless pig or opportunistic politics. But even today, over 2,000 years later, questions about price, the conflict between personal loyalties and universal ideals, and unintended consequences remain more relevant than ever. What would you do if you thought your country was on the path to tyranny? If you saw one man gaining too much power, would you try to stop him? Even if that man was one of your closest friends or allies? These were the questions haunting Roman Senator Marcus Junius Brutus in 44 BCE. Julius Caesar would be assassinated. Opposing unchecked power wasn't just a political matter for Brutus, it was a personal one. He claimed descent from Lucius Junius Brutus, who had helped overthrow the tyrannical king known as Antiochus the Proud, instead of seizing power himself. The elder Brutus led the people and lousing oaths to never again allow a king to rule. Rome became a republic, based on the principle that no one man should hold too much power. Now, 4.5 centuries later, this principle was threatened. Julius Caesar, to the powerful consul, had been dramatic. Years of military triumphs had made him the wealthiest man in Rome, and after defeating his rival Pompey the Great in the bitter civil war, his power was at its peak. His victory and initiatives such as distributing lands to the poor had made him popular with the and many senators vied for his favor by showing him with honors. Statues were built, temples were dedicated, and the whole month was renamed, still called July today. More importantly, the title of dictator means a grand temporary emergency powers in wartime had been bestowed upon Caesar several times in succession, and in 44 BCE he was made dictator perpetuo, dictator for a potential unlimited term. All of this was too much for the senators who feared a return to the monarchy that their ancestors had fought to abolish, as well as those whose own power and ambition were impeded by Caesar's rule. A group of conspirators, calling themselves the Liberators, began to secretly discuss plans for assassination, leading them to Senator Gaius Cassius Longinus and his friend and brother-in-law Brutus. Joining the conspiracy was not easy just for Brutus. Even though Brutus was Pompey in the European civil war, Caesar had personally intervened to save his life, not only pardoning him, but even accepting him as a close advisor and elevating him to important posts. Brutus had accidentally conspired against the man who had treated him like a son, but indeed Cassius's insistence and his Brutus's own fear of Caesar's ambitions won out. The moment they had been waiting for came on March 15. At the Senate meeting held shortly before Caesar would depart on his next military campaign, as many as 60 conspirators surrounded him, seizing daggers from the togas and stabbing at him from all sides. As the story goes, Caesar struggled fiercely until he saw Brutus. Despite the famous line, to Brutus, written by Shakespeare, we don't know Caesar's actual dying words. Some ancient sources claim he said nothing, while others record phrase. And you, Charles, fearing speculation that Brutus might have actually illegitimate, but among Brutus among his attackers, he covered his face and gave up the fight, following the ground after being stabbed 23 times. Unfortunately, Brutus, he and the other conspirators had underestimated Caesar's popularity among the Roman public, many of whom saw him as an effective leader, and sent as a corrupt aristocrat. The moment Caesar's assassination, Rome was in a state of panic. Most of the other senators had fled, while the assassins barricaded themselves on the Capitoline Hill. Mark Antony, Caesar's friend and co-consul, had waited to seize the upper hand, delivering a passionate speech at Caesar's funeral days later that whipped the crowd into frenzy and grief and anger. As a result, the liberators were forced out of Rome. The ensuing vacuum led to a series of civil wars, during which Brutus, facing certain defeat, took his own life. Ironically, the ultimate result would be the opposite of the conspirators had hoped to accomplish: the end of the Republic, the continental power under the office of emperor. Opinions about the assassination were divided from the start and have remained so. As for Brutus himself, few historical figures have inspired such a conflicting legacy. In Dante's Inferno, he was placed in the very center of hell, and eternally chewed by Satan himself for his crime of betrayal. But faithful Gulliver's Travel described him as one of the most virtuous and benevolent people to have lived. The interpretation of Brutus as either selflessly fight against dictatorship or an opportunistic threat has shifted with the tides. But even today, over 2,000 years later, questions about the price of liberty, the conflict between personal loyalties and universal ideals, and unintended consequences remain more relevant than ever. What would you do if you saw a country was on the path to tyranny? If you saw one man gaining too much power, would you try to stop him? Even if the man was one of your closest friends and allies? These were the questions haunting Roman Senator Marcus Junius Brutus in 44 BCE, the year Julius Caesar would be assassinated. Opposing unchecked power wasn't just a political matter for Brutus, it was a personal one. He claimed descent from Jews who had overthrown the tyrannical king, known as Tarquin the Proud. Instead of seizing power himself, the elder Brutus led the people No woman should hold too much power. Now, 4.5 centuries later, this principle was threatened. Julius Caesar's rise to the powerful position of consul had been dramatic. Years of military triumphs had made him the wealthiest man in Rome, and after defeating his rival Pompey the Great in the bitter civil war, his power was at peak. His victories and initiatives such as distributing lands to the poor had made him popular, and many senators vied for his favor by showing him his honors. Statues were built, temples were dedicated, and the whole month was remade, still called right today. More importantly, the title of dictator meant granted temporary emergency powers in wartime had been bestowed upon Caesar several times in succession, and in 44 BC he was made the dictator perpetual, dictator for a potentially unlimited term. All of this was too much for senators who feared a return to the monarchy. Their ancestors had fought the politics, as well as those whose own power and ambition were impeded by Caesar's rule. A group of conspirators calling themselves the Liberators began to secretly discuss plans for assassination. Leading them was the Senator Gaius Cassius Longinus and his friend and brother-in-law Brutus. Joining the conspiracy was not an easy choice for Brutus, even though Brutus had sided with Pompey in the Caesar had personally intervened to save his life. Not only pardoning him, but even accepting him as a close advisor and elevating him to important posts. Brutus was hesitant to conspire against the man who had treated him like a son, but in the end, Cassius' insistence and Brutus' own fear of Caesar's ambitions won out. The moment they had been waiting for came on March 15, at a Senate meeting held shortly before Caesar was to depart on his next military campaign. As many as 60 conspirators surrounded him, unseating daggers from his doggers and stabbing at him from all sides. As the story goes, the Caesar struggled fiercely until he saw Brutus. Despite the famous line, "Et tu, Brute," written by Shakespeare, we don't know the Caesar's actual dying words. Some ancient sources claim he said nothing, while others record the phrase, "And you child," fearing speculation that Brutus may have actually been Caesar's illegitimate son. But all agree that Caesar saw among his attackers. He covered his face and gave up the fight, falling to the ground after being stabbed 23 times. Unfortunately for Brutus, he and the other conspirators had underestimated him among the Roman public. Many of them effectively corrupt. At the moment of Caesar's assassination, Rome was most of the senator was assassinated. Abraham Pilgrim assassinated Caesar's funeral days later. That whipped the crowd in a frenzy of grief and anger. As a result, the Liberators forced the Rome into the ancient power vacuum led to a series of civil wars, during which Brutus, facing certain defeat, took his own life. Ironically, the ultimate result would be the opposite what the conspirator had hoped to, and the end constitutional power under the office of emperor. Opinions of assassination of Caesar were divided from the start and had remained so. As for Brutus himself, few historical figures have inspired such a conspiracy. In the inferno, he was placed in the very center of hell, and eternally chewed by Satan himself for his crime of betrayal. But swift Gulliver's Traveler described him as the most virtuous and benevolent people to have lived. The interpretation put it as either a selfless fighter against dictatorship or opportunistic. But even today, over 2,000 years later, questions about the price of liberty, the conflict between personal loyalties and the universal ideals, and the unintended consequences remain more relevant than ever. Imagine the button you're summoned before the government panel. Even though you haven't committed any crime or been formally charged with one, you are repeated questions about your political views, accused of disloyalty, and asked to incriminate your friends and assassinate. If you don't cooperate, you risk jail or losing your job. This is exactly what happened in the United States in the 1915. As a part of a campaign to expose suspected communists. Named after its most notorious profession of the phenomenon known as Marxism, destroyed thousands of lives careers. For over decades, American political leaders trampled democratic freedom in the name of protecting them. During the 1930s and 1940s, there had been an active small communist party in the United States. Its record was mixed, while the pressure by the struggle for labor and civil rights it also supposed in the Soviet Union. From the start, the American Communist Party faced attacks from conservatives and business leaders, as well as liberals, who criticized during World War when the USA and the USSR were allied against Hitler. Some American communists actually spied for Russian and the cause of Russia. This explanation became known. Domestic communists came to see as a threat to national security. But attempts to eliminate the soon turned into long-lasting widespread political repression in American history. Supported not by net bureaucrats, politicians, journalists, and businessmen, the campaign widely exaggerated the danger of communist subversion. The people behind it harassed anyone suspected to hold left of center. If you hung modern art on your walls, had a multiracial social circle that was signed petitions against nuclear weapons, you might just have been a communist. Starting in the late 1980s, J. Jacob Hoover used the resources of his agency to hunt down the communists and eliminate from any American society. And the criteria that Hoover allowed his use to screen federal employees spread the arrested. Soon, Harvard student universities, company futures, and thousands of other public-private imposing same political tests on the men and women who worked for them. Meanwhile, Congress conducted its own research and subpoenaed hundreds of people to testify before investigative bodies like the House Un-American Activities Committee. If they refused to cooperate, they could be jailed or were commonly fired. Ambitious politicians like Richard Nixon and Joseph McCarthy used such hearings as a partisan weapon. accusing Democrats of being deliberately moving China Communist bloc. Mah-Jong became notorious by flaunting ever-changing lists of alleged communists within the State Department. Egged on by other politicians, he continued to make outrageous accusations based on fabricating evidence. Many citizens reviled McCarthy while others praised him, and when Korean War broke out, McCarthy seemed vindicated. Once became chair, Senate Permanent Subcommittee in 1953, McCarthy's records increased. It was the investigation of the army that finally turned public opinion against him, diminishing his power. McCarthy's colleagues Senate censored him, and he died McCarthyism ended as well. It ruined the just narrowed the American political spectrum. Its damage to democratic institutions would be long-lasting. It unlikely that both Democrats and Republicans who knew that anti-communist parties were deeply unjust, but feared directly opposing them would cut their careers. Even the Supreme Court failed to stop Beijing condoning serious violations of the constitutional right in the name of national security. But the Chinese actual threat to the American government, perhaps though a small one, but the reaction to it was so extreme that it caused damage than the threat itself. And if New Zealand at an uncertain time to attack popular minorities in the name of patriotism, could it all happen? Could it all happen again? The presidency of the United States of America is often said around the upper in the role, but of all accused of misusing that power, only one has left office. The scandal that ended his presidency. Find out as we put this disgraced president's legacy in trial and history versus Richard Nixon. Order. Now, who is the defendant today? Some kind of crook? No, Your Honor. This is Leonard Howard Nixon, the 37th president of the president who served 1969 to 1974. Hold on. Doesn't we a number of years for the presidency. There, he resigned for the good of the nation and was important after he resigned because he was about to be crimes exposed. And what is this crimes? Your Honor, the Watergate scandal was one of the grossest abuses in history. Nixon's man broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters to wiretap the offices and dig up that an opponent for the re-election party campaign. It was established that the president did not order this burglary, but as soon as he learned about it, everything covered up, while lying about it for months. But it for during his own office could have done much more. It's a scandal jeopardizing his accomplishments. Your Honor. Did you know it was President who proposed the creation of an environmental protection agency and signed national environmental policy after interval? Not mention the engagement marine protection act, expansion of clean air after some progressive hazard. Next presidency can be coded southern voters through fear and resentment of civil rights. Speaking of civil rights, he He signed Title IX Amendment banning gender-based discrimination in education and ensured that desegregation schools occur peacefully, and lowered the voting age to 18 so that students could. He was afterwards shot by the National Guard at Kent State. Instead, he called them banned protesting the Vietnam War, a war he had campaigned on ending, but he ended. He ended 2 years after taking office. Meanwhile, his campaign had sabotaged the previous president's peace talk, urging the Vietnamese government support, which my dad didn't materialize. So Paul acted for more than 2 years, and over a million Vietnamese died for nothing. A presidential candidate interfering in the tourism. It is your honor, your collaboration located 1789. I think we are forgetting President Nixon's many foreign policy achievements. It was he who normalized ties with China, causing economic ties that continue today. Are we so sure that's a good thing? And don't forget his support of the coup in Chile, the repressed democratically left alien with a brutal military dictator. It's a part of against communism and the agent was the fear of the lower class and rising against the rich. President Nixon could have predicted the violence of Pinochet's regime, but being anti-communist, he proposed to guarantee basic income for all American families, still a radical concept today. Just kind of 40 years later, still burger business was he craft or not. President Nixon may have violated the World War II, but what was the real harm compared to all he accomplished while in office? The harm was to democracy itself. The whole point of ideas Nixon claimed to promote abroad is that related accountability and above the law, whatever reason those ideas are undermined. In the future, accountable to the law are be out of job. Morning presidents have compromised some principles to achieve results, but law-breaking covers the very public, the nation. Entire laws changes in the history. What would you do if you thought your country was on the path to tyranny? If you saw one man gaining too much power, would you try to stop him? Even if that man was your the closest friend and ally, this was Roman Senator Marcus 44 BCE. The usual Caesar would be assassinated. Opposing unchecked power wasn't just a political matter for Brutus, it was a personal one. He claimed descent from Lucius Junius, who had a tyrannical king known as a Turcan. The elder Brutus led people in a losing oath to never Rome became a republic based on the republic. No one should hold too much power now, for this principle was written. Julius Caesar's rise to the powerful position of consul had been dramatic. Years of military triumphs had made him success in Rome. Pompey bitter civil war. His power was at peak. His victories and instances such as distributing land to the poor had made him mentioned by his people and showing his own statues were built, temples dedicated. The whole month was renamed, still called July today. More importantly, the title Dictator Mah-Jong has been bestowed upon Caesar several times in succession. In BCE, he was made dictator perpetual, dictator for potentially unlimited time. All of this was too much for the senators, therefore he was returned to the and Caesar had fought to abolish, as well as the fruits of ambition were impeded by Caesar's rule. A group of conspirators, calling themselves the liberators, began to secretly discuss plans for assassination. Leading them was the Senator Cassius Ruginus and his friend and brother-in-law Brutus. Joining the conspiracy was not an easy choice for Brutus, even though Brutus Caesar had personally intervened to save his life, not only pardoning him, but even accepting him as a close advisor and elevating him to important posts. Brutus was hesitant to conspire against the man who had treated him like a son, but in the end, Cassius' insistence and Brutus' own fear of Caesar's ambition to monarch. The moment info came and shortly before Caesar would depart on his next military campaign. As many as 60 conspirators surrounded him, seizing daggers from their doors and stabbing him from all sides. As the story goes, Caesar struggled fiercely until he survived us. Despite the famous line, a true brute written by was to mention nothing but others because of red. And you, child, pure speculation that Brutus may have been actually been his son. As overly Caesar among his attackers, he covered his face and gave up the fight, falling into 23 times. Unfortunately for Brutus, he and other conspirators had another Caesar's popularity among the Roman power. Many of whom saw him as a effective and sent as a corrupt, at least assassination. Romans panic. Most of these senators had fled, while assassins barricaded themselves on Capitol Hill. Unfortunately, Caesar's friend was swift to the upper hand, delivering a passionate speech at Caesar's funeral days later, whipped the crowd into a frenzy and grief and anger. As a result, the deliverers were forced out of Rome, and seeing power vacuum led to a series of civil wars. Hesitated took his own life. Ironically, ultimately the opposite of the conspirators had hoped to confront and the emperor. Opinion of assassins Caesar was divided and remained so as Brutus. He placed the direction of hell. The end eternal sudden betrayal. The swift Garibal's struggle described him as one of the virtuous, benevolent people. The interpretation of as of opportunistic type of politics. But even today, over 2,000 years later, question about the price of liberty, the connection between personal loyalty and universal ideals, and unintended consequences remain more relevant than ever.